Hey, welcome everybody. It's Rob here from the Bestseller Secrets podcast. Really excited to have an old friend with me who's written a new book that I've already started reading. I absolutely love it. Craig Ballantyne, known as the world's most disciplined man, who just wrote a book called The Dark Side of Discipline. Stop chasing, suffer less, achieve more. I known Craig for a while from earlytorise.com, creator of Turbulence Training Fitness. Just great stuff, old stuff that you've made a huge difference in the world with. I love your stuff. I've loved your Early to Rise project and have been a follower of that since before you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Since Mark Ford was writing it, who I absolutely love. So, Craig, thanks, man. Great to have you here. Really excited to talk about your newest book.
This is gonna be a lot of fun, Rob.
Yeah, I think so too. Although we may begin with something that's not so fun. So I started reading it,
Yeah.
and you begin telling a story about Chuck, multimillionaire with six-pack abs and a successful business, et cetera, that got kind of caught in the dark side of discipline. And first thing I want to know, was that a real person? And could you talk a little bit about, for those that are maybe listening and haven't read the book yet, talk about the story a little, if you would.
So it's a friend of mine, and he had everything. Like he really was successful in many, many areas. And the things in which he were successful clearly required discipline. And,
Yeah.
to build a business, to have a family, kids, and, also physique wise, took a lot of discipline for him to achieve that. But, like many of us, he opened up this thing here, the phone, and he,
Yeah.
saw somebody doing something on Instagram that he had never done and thought, well, if I've never done that and they're saying that makes you disciplined, I guess I better go do it. And fast forward, more than 12 months later, I just watched this all unfold on social media. And I'm like, I don't know why you're doing all these things. Because, he got into some of these online challenges that require you to do a lot of things. Like it's
Right.
definitely a time commitment of well over 2.5 hours per day to do this stuff. Meanwhile, I already knew that through, even doing some coaching with him that, time was already pretty pinched for him. And now, throwing another 2.5 hours, I just didn't understand. And a few months after that, I found out that his marriage had ended, and it
Mm.
really hurt me because this is a friend I really looked up, and I thought, wow, this guy has it all,
Right.
and he did these things. Now, the things that he did, I'm not saying he was sat on the couch and watched Netflix and ate a bag of
Right.
chips and had 4 glasses of wine at night. No, what he did were good things. Working out and reading and cold plunging and stuff like that. Those were good things, but he let the good get in the way of the great. And
Mm.
that, Rob, is the dark side of discipline. That, we can chase this discipline. And discipline is a good thing when used appropriately. Discipline was a savior for me when I was a binge drinker and
Yeah.
introverted and anxiety attacks and all these things that, were the lower level of me. And discipline allowed me to elevate. But then I personally have also crossed the discipline line, the threshold, where and it's a fine line where discipline goes from your savior to you being a servant of the discipline.
Right. Right.
And Rob, I swung the pendulum way too hard for a long time. So in my friend Chuck, I saw a lot of my past mistakes. Now, fortunately, I had figured myself out before anything kind of went too off the rails. But I had exercise streaks of 1,000 days. Always going to bed super early, which I still do, but I do it purposefully, and my life is built around that. But I did a lot of things. I had a very rigid life for a long time where I missed out on things that didn't need to be missed out on and made me behave in a way that, I didn't have to behave that way. So that's the dark side of discipline, where you allow the good, the pursuit of good, get in the way of great. And
Mm.
people listening, what we want to be best-selling authors. Is your book getting done fast enough? Are you even starting the book? Are you listening to this with the idea that I'm going to be a bestseller one day? I'm going to start writing a book one day, but
Yeah.
I have all these other things that I'm going to do first, and it gets in the way of my writing time. Well, if that's the case, the good is getting in the way of the great, and that's a dark side.
Right. Right. I would imagine the majority of people might even hear this and think, I absolutely need more discipline in my life. So the idea that there's a dark side when I need to discipline myself to write my book, to maybe get in better shape, to et cetera. In the book, do you kind of reconcile some of those things as well? I would imagine you have to talk about both ends of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And certainly the book will show you how to get rid of bad habits and build good habits. So that's the
Good.
second part of the book.
Okay.
But one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I was originally a personal trainer at the start of my career, and what you learn when it comes to strength training is that strength training is a specific, like an exercise specific result is what you get. So if you want to get better at the bench press, doing push-ups, it's a similar exercise, but push-ups will really not make you stronger at a bench press. The training must be specific. And
Mm,
that's the same with our discipline. So if somebody wants to become more disciplined, which is a generic thing, which can mean a million things to a million different people,
right.
if they say, I want to be more disciplined, we have to break it down and we have to ask you, what's your specific definition of success when you say be more disciplined? Because
Yeah.
for, Tom, it might be, I need to stop, using my phone when I'm around my family because I'm getting into trouble from my wife and my kids. Well, that's different than Larry, who needs to be more disciplined around what he consumes, what food he has in the house, and his exercise habits. They both need more discipline, but they need it in different areas.
Yeah.
And I use this example in the book. I say there was once a man who was the world's most disciplined athlete, and he cheated on his wife with 30 or so women at the same time. And it's Tiger Woods. He
Yeah.
was the world's most disciplined golfer. People, the other golfers feared him. They were like, I cannot believe it. This guy's number one and he's practicing 12 hours a day. But just because he was disciplined in golf, it didn't translate into discipline in every area of his life. And he was actually the
Right.
world's most undisciplined in the area that mattered the most. So the transferability of discipline, so if you think that if I do this 100 push-ups in 100 days challenge, one I always pick on because it's ridiculous, 100 push-ups in 100 days, that's not going to make you more disciplined at writing. You just did 100 push-ups in 100 days. Great, you figured out how to do that, but that doesn't mean you're going to be more disciplined in your writing. So the caution here is that for people who think I need to be more disciplined in this area of my life, maybe to write a book, well, what you need to do is build systems that make writing the book easier. And you
Mm,
don't have to necessarily do a hard thing like run a marathon or do a cold plunge or whatever. Like you don't have to do those things to write a book. You have to build the systems that make the writing almost automatic.
yeah, I love that. I watched a video of a mutual friend of ours and talking about you, Russell Brunson, and talk about a guy that is hardworking and reached in many ways the pinnacle of success. Beautiful family,
Mhm.
great situation. Obviously, what he's done with ClickFunnels, and he talked about how you really helped him like accelerate his productivity, which is pretty remarkable for a guy that is already as productive as Russell Brunson. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what does that mean? Is that part of these systems? Is that
It
part of
it
this
is in a
idea?
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is in a way. So to give a backstory on Russell, years ago we got my first book, The Perfect Day Formula, and he was the kind of guy who stayed up till 2 in the morning. And I was
Yeah.
writing in the book about getting up early, and he thought I was insane. That's what he actually said in the video that he made about me. And then he was like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm gonna, he went to bed early at night. He got up in the morning, nothing crazy, like maybe 5 or 6 in the morning, and he went to work on his number one project, and he got a lot done. And he was like, huh, this is interesting. Wake up in the morning, attack your number one thing rather than stay up really late and work on it. Then kind of messes up the family dynamic when you're staying up till 2 in the morning. And it was just a shift. Now that is a system. So we talk about building effortless discipline systems in the book, and the effortless discipline systems allow you to be more productive. They allow you to stop watching too much Netflix, or stop drinking too much alcohol, or stop playing too many video games, or whatever it is that you want to stop doing, and shift to a better habit. And the effortless discipline systems are really, really simple. There's just three components to it. It's EPC, and it's elimination, preparation, and connection. And anybody who's read anything about habit change knows that one of the most important things you need to do when dropping a bad habit is make it hard to do. So put up a lot of friction.
Yeah.
Because if you flip it and you think about all the good things that you've tried to do in the past, whether it's tried to do meditation, or whether it's try to exercise, or whether it's try to write a book even, the reason why you struggled with it in the past is because it wasn't part of your routine. It wasn't almost automatic. And so for most people, what they do, they have these bad habits that have been, a habit they've done since they were a teenager. Like one of my best friends that I grew up with, he went home every day after high school, watched TV from like 4 p.m. till 10 p.m., went to his room, took a bag of snacks, and went up there. And he did that for 4 years in a row of high school, did it through some college, and then when he got a job, he was doing the same thing. And the next thing you know, he's pretty overweight because he wasn't a young, teenager anymore, burning off those calories. Because he would come home from work, he would grab the food, he would watch TV. It was just ingrained in him.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, if you want to exercise, and that's been your lifestyle in the past of, sitting and watching TV, like that's just a complete change. And there's a lot of friction in the way of you starting the exercise. So we have to flip it around. We have to get the junk food out of the house. That's the elimination. It makes it harder to do that. We have to stop hanging around people who, all they ever really do is get us to eat junk food. So if you
Mm,
have those people in your lives, try and distance yourself and spend less time with them. And then stay out of environments in which you are going to be around, really junky food, whether it's going to the movies or whatever, just for a little bit until you fix the habits. Because this is what I did when I was a binge drinker, Rob, is I had to stop going to bars. I had to get all the alcohol out of my house, and I had to stop hanging around toxic people who
right.
just dragged me down to drinking. Now, now on the flip side, after the elimination, that made it hard to do the bad habit. On the flip side, I had some friends who I wanted to continue spending time with who were in that drinking crew, but all I had to do was now plan and prepare. On the flip side, you plan and prepare to make the good habit easier to do. So I planned and prepared to have Saturday morning activities with my friends that, hiking, going to the
Nice.
gym, that type of stuff,
Probably not bringing a
non-drinking.
bottle of Jack Daniels with you on the
Right.
hike,
Nobody
right?
was. Nobody was that hardcore in the gym. So I was able to do something better and replace the bad habit. And then finally, the real missing link here is connection. And connection is accountability, another word for accountability. And there's two ways to have accountability, and both of them can be life-changing. So the first one could be accountability to a single individual who you deeply do not want to disappoint.
Mm,
Yeah. When you have accountability to somebody you look up to as a big brother or a mentor or a big sister, or, you're like, man, that guy's like my father. And you tell that person, I'm going to do XYZ. Well, you just told somebody you deeply do not want to disappoint.
yeah.
And your mind will just move mountains in order for you to follow through. The other way to do it is to join a community.
Mm,
And whether it's a Facebook group or a school community or some other thing where there's online or in person as well, obviously, and you tell that group, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Well, now if you're a person of integrity, you don't want to be a hypocrite. So you're going to follow through on that too. And that's an unused secret ingredient to success. And I use this with the book. On January 1st of 2024, I told my coaching clients, I have hundreds of coaching clients in our business, and I said, I'm going to have the first draft of this book done by March 16th of 2024. And there were days when I woke up and I didn't want to write. And I was like, I want to do how much anything
yeah.
else I wanted to do. But I had that promise to those people and I delivered. Now I delivered a pretty ugly first draft, but it was done. It
Right.
was done. It took another almost a year to get the book finished, and insert some very important parts. But problem is that most people have this dream inside of them, and they don't tell anyone positive. Now I'm not telling. Do not tell negative people this. Do not tell the toxic people this, because if you tell the toxic person your goals, they'll drag you down and they'll
Right.
berate you. But if you tell positive people, it's good. But most people don't tell anyone. And so they keep it inside. And the easiest person to disappoint is themselves.
Mm,
Yeah. So on January 1st, they wake up and say, oh, this year I'm going to lose the weight or I'm going to write the book. But they only tell that to themselves. And
right.
then, there's no accountability. That connection is so important.
Yeah, I love that. I want to make a comment about that, but I want to talk about your writing routine. Since we're talking about discipline, and it did require you shared about the last piece of it, the community piece, how you used it. But I want to talk about in general because you create a lot of content and you've been doing that for a long time, and so you certainly have a successful process in doing it. But before, one thing that you mentioned about community, I've heard this and I've noticed it in myself a little bit as well, and I'm wondering about your thoughts on it. And that is, sometimes there's a desire to say something about a goal because it releases endorphins. It makes your brain happy, as though that goal is already achieved because you've spoken to someone about it. Can you talk about the difference between that and what you're talking about with community?
The first big breakthrough I had around this was years ago. You mentioned at the start that I ran this thing called turbulence training.
Yeah.
And that was a fitness program that I ran from about 2001 to 2015. And we had a lot of these before and after transformation contests where people, they take a picture of themselves on day one, they're not in great shape. And after 12 weeks, they take another photo, then the transformation. We had the program that was free. Like, you did not have to pay to enter, and you could win up to $3,000 of my money. I gave away a lot of money over the years in that. And obviously got lots of good marketing, but so there's no barrier to entry, and there's a lot of incentive to stay. And yet 80% of the people who signed up on day one didn't make it.
Wow.
And so I would look and I go, why, particularly these individuals who won and made amazing changes and obviously stuck through it. What was it? And it wasn't that they had great support. I mean, we had single moms win, with no support. It wasn't that they had previous experience or knowledge, or, they didn't have a job, so they had all the time. No, 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 no. And it was the fact that I could almost guarantee that someone would finish and do pretty well if they posted their before photo on day one in the forum. We had one of those old school forums back in the day. And that was almost always the commonality. And so
Really?
that is raising their hand. It's a burn the boats moment, right? Like, here's me on the
Yeah.
internet. It was a private forum still, but they didn't know any of these people.
Still, man. I mean, that's bold.
Right, right. Here's me in my bikini, or,
Yeah.
my underwear, and let's be honest, I'm 35, 40 pounds overweight. I'm not looking great, and my hair's not done, and, but that is a burn the boats moment, because so now it's like, I've gone this far. I've done this. They have another level of commitment.
Hmm.
They have another level of commitment. And the other thing is, the people who saw that were then so positive and supporting of the person, that if that person didn't post for 2 days in a row, there'd be 10 messages. Hey, everything okay? What you doing?
Wow.
And I have this phrase that I actually came to, really has described my life after, I met my wife since, the last time was on the show, I met my wife. I've had 3 kids, I'm a busy guy. And so I met my wife because I asked for help and introductions. I've grown my businesses because of the people I know. I got in great shape because I had good training partners. And now I live by this quote that everything in life is easier when you know more good people.
Wow. That's a great quote.
It's true, man.
It
It's
is.
true.
It's a great quote.
Because the amazing thing about good people, and everyone knows a good person in their head, and they're going to go, yes, that's right, when I say this, is that if you tell a good person that you want to achieve something, or that you want tickets to some show, or that, you want to meet somebody, or that you need help with something,
Yeah.
the good person, the program starts running in their head, whether they know it or not, consciously or subconsciously. The program
Yeah.
starts running. My friend needs this. How
Right.
can I help them?
Yeah.
And they go out of their way. I mean, man, if you know good women and you're a single guy and you tell a bunch of, positive women that you're looking for somebody, they just got a second job. Like, they will not stop with the introductions. It's really, truly wonderful. And I'm so grateful for my friends that did this. But I just couldn't believe, like, every day I'd wake up and be like, hey, do you want to meet this girl? And I'm like, this is great. But and it's just because I raised my hand and said, this is what
Wow.
I'm trying to do. It's really powerful.
That is beautiful. That's great. And that's obviously how you met your wife. So
Yeah,
wow.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was kind of, I'll tell a quick funny story, because it is, but it isn't how I met my wife.
Okay.
I was doing these events pre-COVID where I would take entrepreneurs through a 90-day plan of how to grow their business. But we also can do it for personal. So you can do it to lose weight or write a book. I've done these, plans for writing a book. And I showed people my plan for meeting my wife in the next 90 days. So, like, I guess there's a TV show called 90 Day Fiance, and I actually lived it. So what you do on these plans is, in the top left hand corner, you write an outcome goal. Like, I want to write my first book, I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to make $100,000 in the next 90 days, or I want to, in my particular case, it was, I want to have 12 dates in the next 90 days. Didn't matter if it was 12 dates with one girl or one date with 12 girls. All it had to
Okay.
be was 12 dates. Now, you don't fully control the outcome goal, but what you control are the action steps that we put underneath that. And the biggest action step for me was, all my best relationships I've ever had have been introductions from friends. So I thought, I know 2 really, really well connected women in the city of Toronto, where I was living at the time. One was an event planner, and one ran the Toronto Ladies Business Community. Perfect. Great. I'm going to go and ask them for introductions. So I did. Now, my one friend, she sent me 5 introductions, Instagram profiles. And I looked at them and I went, nope, 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 nope. And I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do now? I'm such an ingrateful person, right?
Right, right.
So here's what I do, Rob. I go, I know. I'll go to her page and I'll look through who she follows. And
Smart.
but get this, I scroll through 30 tiny circles and I pick one, which is who became my wife. So I pick my wife from these tiny circles and I go, I'd like an introduction to her. Like, so so everybody, when you're on your phone next, open up your Instagram, click on, Rob's page and go and look at who he follows and look how tiny those circles are and then scroll through them and
Wow.
imagine picking your spouse from that. So my friend said, well, she lives in Vancouver. You live in Toronto. I thought you wanted somebody here. But sure, I'll introduce you to her. And, the introduction was made. We hit it off. I came out here very quickly and, we had some dates and stuff. And the next thing you know, I moved out to Vancouver and
Rest is history.
the rest is history.
I mean, Vancouver is no short distance from Toronto. I mean,
It's
that's
it's like flying New York to LA.
yeah, that's a hike, man. That is
Yeah.
a hike. So obviously it was well worth it. Congrats.
Yeah, yeah. Moved out here, and we've traveled around the world since, and we're settled back in Vancouver now with 3 kids, and
Beautiful place. I was
that's 6 years. That's not even 6 years since that happened.
really.
Yeah.
Do you get out to Kelowna much or out in that
I've
area?
never been out there, but there's
Ah,
so many big names in books and marketing and stuff that are out there. My wife's been there, but we haven't.
it's a great spot. I was out there to visit Todd Herman and a
Oh yeah.
few of the other guys that are good buddies of mine. And wow, I loved it. I've been to Toronto and many other places in Canada. It's my favorite. We played golf out there. Wow, what a beautiful place.
It gets a little cold in the winter compared
Yeah,
to Vancouver, but
yeah, I've heard that.
Vancouver is just awesome. I'm really happy
Nice.
here.
Nice. Okay. Switch back for a moment.
Mhm.
Talk to me about your writing habit, your
Mhm.
writing system, and maybe not just for the book, but in general.
Yeah.
You're a content creator. You're a writer. So how do you go about that? What's your process like?
Yeah, general writing is I get up first thing in the morning and I write. And so from bed to desk and first word, it could be 7 minutes. It's like not much time at all.
Wow.
Because for me, world's most disciplined man, I'm not that disciplined, but I have to have these systems that I've set
Yeah.
up that make the right actions automatic. So if I can write later in the day if I have to. But if I don't have to, like if I don't have a pressing deadline, I mean, it's a whole lot harder for me to write at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I did was I realized, my brain operates really well early in the morning. And, when I was a personal trainer, I was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And through the years, I've started getting up earlier because there's no distractions for me. I have the
Right.
greatest we all naturally have the greatest discipline, willpower, and intention first thing in the morning. So whatever it is, that hardest thing that somebody needs to be doing that's listening to this, whether you need to start an exercise program for your health, whether you need to start writing, whether you need to work on your finances and get out of credit card debt or whatever, you're going to be best if you get up and go right at it first thing in the morning. You have the greatest discipline, willpower, and intention. It's going to be harder over the course of the day. Just naturally is for everybody, right? You
Yeah.
got kids puking at school and fires in your business and all that type of stuff. It just gets harder. So I get up and to do that. That's the general approach. And the more specific approach is that almost all my days look the same. So I have that writing block from about 4 until 6, 6:30, whenever the kids start getting up. And the day before, I plan what I'm going to write. So, I know what I'm doing pretty much every day for maybe the rest of my life. From 4 to 6 in the morning, I'm writing, and then from 6 to 8, I take care of my kids, and then from 8 to 11, I go back do a little bit of writing and some revenue stuff, revenue generating activities we call it in the business. Then I go and have a workout. Then I come back and do these podcasts. So I just got back from the gym and doing this with you, and then I end the day at 4, and I plan and prepare tomorrow's specific writing in the late afternoon. Now, here's a cool thing that I use that anybody can use that I truly believe, and it's a bit woo woo. So bear with me here. Dan Kennedy, Dan Kennedy, the marketing guy.
Love Dan. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I love Dan.
So
Big
Dan
fan.
Kennedy has told this story, and whether or not it is true, I don't know, but it sounds so good.
You can say that about all of Dan's stories.
Well, yeah, yeah. So that's one funny thing about Dan's stories. The other thing is I can finish all of his stories because I've been to his seminars. Like I know
Right, right.
exactly
Me
what
too.
he's going to
Me too.
say. So Dan Kennedy said that years ago on the due date for Napoleon Hill's book Think and Grow Rich, he didn't have a title. Well, in fact, he did have a title, and the title was really bad. And have you heard this story? Do you know what the
I
title
don't
is?
think so. I don't think I've
Okay.
heard it.
So the original title of Think and Grow Rich was Use Your Noodle to Get the Boodle. That's what Dan says. So it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Napoleon Hill has to submit the title by 5 o'clock, as legend goes. And so Napoleon Hill goes and has a nap. And he wakes up and he goes, Think and Grow Rich. And Dan's telling this story to emphasize the power of your subconscious mind.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
if you tell your subconscious mind to work on something while you sleep, it will. And I believe it to be true.
I do
So,
too.
so what I do you know a guy named Adam Whitty? Have you ever heard of him in the publishing
Sure.
world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So years and years ago, I did a small fitness book with Adam, and his company showed me like, hey, listen, if you want to write a 10-chapter book, you go and you put 3 subsections in each chapter, and then under each subsection, you write 5 questions. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's actually a pretty easy way to write a book. Because prior to that, what I had done was I had woken up and gone to my computer and opened up Word document and had a blank screen stare back at me and me stare at it. And the next thing you know, an hour goes by and you get nothing done. But if you do that, if you even just do some bullet point prompting the day before, like, okay, let's see, tomorrow I want to write 1,500 words on why Charlie Munger was the world's most disciplined man, which is actually a section in my book. All right, well, I want to write about, Charlie's relationship with Warren, Charlie's favorite quote. I want to write about Charlie and his habits and, things that Charlie did that don't sound disciplined. Okay, great. So now I got 4 bullet points. It's a 1,500 word article. I'm going to let my brain figure that stuff out while I go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, instead of there being a blank screen there, which makes it, very hard to write and sometimes, I've just got prompts. At the
Yeah.
very least, I have 4 bullet point prompts. And all I have to do is write 400 words for each bullet point, and I've got, the first draft of the article done. But man, there's been some mornings I wake up and I write 2,000 words in an hour.
It just flies.
It just flies out
Wow.
of me. I mean,
Wow.
man, I always tell people the most valuable class that I ever took was 10th grade keyboarding. Like, of
Yeah.
everything that I've taken in my entire life,
Yeah.
because writing has made me do okay, and it was Miss Carr and 10th grade keyboarding. Yeah.
No kidding.
And so, like, I love reading about authors and their writing time. And Stephen King, the horror guy, he has this ritual and routine. Like, he's got the effortless discipline systems. Like, he used to, for years and years and years, he would go to his attic, crappy attic in his house, even when he was rich, sit in front of his word processor. This is how old the story is. And from 9 a.m., when everybody's eating their Wheaties, he's writing Pet Cemetery. And from 9 a.m. until he had 2,000 words done, he would stay in the attic. And that was it. That was the system.
Yeah.
That's the only system you need in order to write a book. There's no phones up there. There was no distractions. It was just him in a room.
Totally creepy too. An old attic.
Yeah, right. But it
Perfect.
was like, here's your deadline, and you're not getting your butt out of the chair until 2,000 words are done.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows anything about Stephen King, he's a huge Boston Red Sox fan. You see
Mm.
Boston Red Sox stuff in almost all of his books, or most of his books. Definitely there was some Pet Cemetery. And Boston Red Sox played a lot of afternoon games. So in the summertime, he had a lot of incentive to finish his 2,000 words because he didn't want to be late for the Boston Red Sox game.
How
So you
funny.
have so you have this deadline. Deadlines are part of a system to
Yeah.
make you do the work faster. So, so overall, my specific approach is plan and prepare the day before. Give my brain something to work on overnight. And this goes for any problem you have in your life. You just tell your brain to figure it out while you go to sleep, and it can. Just like, go for a walk, figure it out. And then I wake up in the morning and I go right to it, and I have the prompts, and the words generally flow out, and
Mm.
away I go.
I love it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is that I do a lot of more Q&A writing these days, because we coach a lot of business owners and they send in a lot of questions, and it just gives me endless amounts of content. And
Yeah.
I create a lot of content that way too.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. Was this obviously is applicable to a book, but you're writing every day, period, because you're
Hmm.
writing for Early to Rise and a lot of your other stuff, right?
Yeah, I easily write 8,000 words a week.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And have been
Yeah.
doing that for a decade plus.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah, love it. Great system. Love your system. Easy to follow, and I don't think it's woo woo at all. What you described about from planting in your subconscious what the problem is makes total sense. I mean, that's the way we work.
Yeah. And I think so. So you add the gasoline to add to the fire here is accountability, right? So if everybody's like, well, this sounds really good, I'm going to start
Yeah.
doing this, but you don't tell anyone,
Right.
it's really easy for you to fall off. But if you have a writing partner, or if you want to work with Rob, and you're working with Rob, and you like tell Rob, this is what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
every morning, I'm going to get up at 6, I'm going to write for an hour and a half, and at 7:30 I'm going to text you how many words I wrote.
Yeah.
Man, you next thing, they're just going to pile up, and the next thing you know, you got a book done.
Yeah. And you have a habit created.
Yeah. Hey, can I
It-
can I tell you one or two things about the book that I think people will find helpful that
Please.
I
Yeah.
did
Let's
different?
dive back in.
So this is about the book writing. So over the years, I've realized something. And this is partly because I do this too, but most people don't read the books they buy, right?
Mm.
So I don't know how many unread books you have in your house, Rob, but I have at least 200, right?
Yeah, I
I
have a
have
lot.
everything Dan Kennedy recommends, stuff that I see from Vern Harnish. I have a lot of unread books in my house. If I have unread books in my house, I'm an author, I love books. Think about everybody else who's buying your book.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to understand the importance of a really good cover and title in order to get your book sales. It's very much like if anybody does any YouTube, the YouTube secrets are not like, hey, here's how you have to structure the content in your video. No,
Right.
the YouTube secrets are what's your thumbnail look like and what's the
Right.
title of the video.
Yeah.
And that's going to be what's going to determine most of your views. Same with your book sales. It's going to be cover and title. Now, ideally, people read the book, but even, so a small fraction of the people who buy the books read them. And a smaller fraction still of the people who start reading them get past chapter one. So Vern Harnish, who has written Scaling Up and a few other books, I sent my co-author, Daniel Woodrum, to an event with Vern. And he said, we pack the first chapter full of very valuable content so that somebody gets something memorable and helpful
Right
from
out
the
of the
first
gate.
chapter, and it makes them more likely to refer somebody else, right? Because you're not going to refer somebody to a book if you haven't read anything, or
Yeah.
if you've read something and haven't gotten anything out of it.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of business books out there, it's like they start off with a little bit of a story, and then they talk about, hey, what's in this book, and it's like,
Yeah. Why did I write it?
why?
Yeah.
Yeah, why? Well, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
get
Give me
cut that
some.
up,
Yeah.
right? And then the last thing is, my goal for this book was 25,000 words. It ended up being 26,000, but I really just want to keep it as tight as possible. And back to Stephen King, he has a phrase called "kill your darlings."
Yep.
Which means you've got a line in there, you got a section in there which sounds smart, you think it's funny, but does it flow in the book? No. And so I've got a lot of dead darlings saved in my email drafts. I think we got up to like 30,000 words at one point. I was like, oh man, this is so good, this is so funny, but it was a little repetitive,
Yeah.
and it just didn't it worsened the book. So I'm like, oh fine, I'm gonna take it out, and but I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm just going to keep in my email drafts or something like that.
Yeah.
So be tighten your writing. That's what I tell my
Yeah.
co-author. Tighten your writing, because
Yeah.
he uses a few too many words, and it's just you're just fighting it, right? And so if somebody picks up a short book with a nice cover, the chances of them consuming it are greater than a book this thick. And like 4 Hour Chef by Tim Ferriss. I remember that book. I opened it up and I was like, I'm not reading this. It's like 500 pages, and it's not. Like, good on him for him.
A
The
4 hour
content.
body right there. I mean, it's
Yeah,
right
man.
there. And when I got it, I was freaked out. I was like, it's like you said, 600 pages. I'm like, where do you begin?
Yeah, it's gonna be 400 hours to read about the 4 hour body. It just doesn't compute in my head. So the title probably helped them in the previous work, but that's
Yeah.
I love all the other authors. I want you to have success. I know how hard
Yeah.
it is to get people to read your book, um and the last thing I'll say is that in our stats, we've got 3 books out there prior to Dark Side of Discipline. We look at the Amazon stats all the time, and audiobooks twice as many sales as the other two, as ebook and paperback. So
So true.
if you have not done your audiobook, by all means, absolutely 100%, you are missing out. And what I've found is through conversation with people who bought our books and become coaching clients, is that anybody who consumes an audiobook is actually likely to have listened to it 2, 3, 4, 5
Mm.
times. And the reason why the audiobook is both listened to more, purchased more, and listened to more frequently is because you can do it all day long, hands free.
And 1.5 speed or 1 3/4
Yeah,
speed
yeah,
or
that's a good point.
2x speed, right?
Yeah,
I love that.
I have some friends who only read books at 3x speed while they have their finger going along. They got a system for like consuming a lot of books,
I
which
have
is
some friends
fine.
that do that too. I can't get
Yeah.
to 3x speed, man. I
Yeah,
can't
that's
do
fast.
that.
That's
That's so
fast.
fast. Thank you for saying that. Now, I've had a lot of these conversations. I cannot tell you how often I preach your cover and title need to be world class. And honestly,
Seriously.
it's not that hard unless you are in love with your own idea. If you just look at 2024, 100 best selling books in your category, in your genre, from last year, you'll have a pretty good idea of what a great cover and what a great title should be in your genre. And you don't
Okay.
knock someone off, but you'll at
No.
least have a good idea of what the elements are.
Yeah, so let me just quickly walk you through how our cover came to be. So,
Which I
similar to
love,
how.
by the way, which is
Thank
a
you.
it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it. And so, my previous covers were not great, and I didn't know the importance of the cover. But one of my mentors said, very similar to me picking out my wife on Instagram. When you go to Amazon, the thumbnail has to stand out, right?
Yep.
Because people who buy books, I don't buy books like this, but many people do buy books like this. They bought a book, and then underneath it says recommended. And if you have a cover that stands out, well, you got a better shot at it, right?
Yep.
And so, a great point that you made. If you're married to your idea, oh man,
Yeah.
um, that's unfortunate. I was not. I had a bunch of ideas. I had ideas around, discipline being a double-edged sword. So I had some swords in my ideas. So I threw a bunch of ideas to a guy that does a little bit of artwork for us in our business, and he made some pretty ugly covers, but it was fine. And then we took those to 99 designs,
Mm.
and we had a cover contest. So
Contest.
99
Yeah.
designs, I forget, maybe we paid like the highest level, maybe it was $1,000, I can't
Maybe a
remember.
grand, yeah, to do
Yeah.
something like that. You get hundreds of examples.
Yeah. So we did that with very specific recommendations, and we got a bunch in. And there were some nice ones. Now they were really just the words, and there wasn't a lot of imagery in them. So I send them again to one of my mentors, and he goes, "Give them all the worst rating and tell them to try again." And so we got some new stuff. And then what he did is he took a bunch of ideas and he started using AI, and he came, he's, you think like Dark Side of the Moon, and then like, oh, eclipse.
Yeah.
So some people don't realize it's an eclipse, and I think somebody else thought it was like a fireball or something. But anyways, it is an eclipse.
It looks like an
And
eclipse.
yeah, somebody thought it was something totally different.
No, it looks like an eclipse.
So we had this ugly eclipse that we then went back to the 99 designs and said, here's the new approach we would like you to take. Please resubmit. And some guy just nailed the cover,
Yeah.
and he won in our $1,000 or whatever it is, and we got all the files, and so that's how our cover came to be. So if people out there are wondering, what the heck, how do I even come up with a cover idea if I'm not an artist, I'm just a
Yeah.
writer, that's how
Yeah.
we did it.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
pretty
Love it.
neat little process.
Great stuff. Great stuff, Craig. I always kind of end with this question, or at least I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Bestseller secrets, my company, Bestseller Publishing. I mean, we're very pragmatic when it comes to writing books. Yes, we believe that there's art and creativity, and certainly you have to dig deep, right? As I think Hemingway said, writing is splitting open your veins and bleeding on the paper. So there's an element of discipline and difficulty, but from a pragmatic sense, you're writing books for your business. You're writing books with a business, in mind. What have your books done for you? How have you used your books to grow your business to be who you are today, from a business perspective?
Great question. So before I tell you that, here's what my books did. They got me married. So most
Wow.
people, I was just talking to a guy on Instagram today because, so another famous Dan Kennedy story. Dan Kennedy knew this guy. Oh man, Gary Halbert was a copywriter that Dan Kennedy knew, and Gary Halbert in the 1980s took out a full-page ad in the LA Times that was a personal ad. He was writing about the wife that he wanted to have. A full page ad. It must have cost him $100,000 in the 1980s to do this. And he got a lot of hate mail about it because he was very specific about who he wanted, who he didn't want. So I kind of did that in my Perfect Day Formula book, because in the book, I talk about creating a vision for your life. And I write that vision for my life very specific about the woman that I want, that in 5 years from now I'm going to be married to and have kids with. And I wrote it so specific, people actually thought I was married. They were like, "Hey, how's your wife?" And I'm like, I'm married. but so I actually snuck in a personal ad inside my book
Wow.
that helped me get
Wow.
married. Yeah, so most people don't know that about my stories. But anyways, the Perfect Day Formula, man, that one probably has the most sales. It led to the Russell Brunson making the podcast. Now, most people, oh, that's pretty cool. Here's the thing. We took quotes from that podcast of Russell. It's called Mark. He did it. It's called
Marketing
Marketing in the
secrets.
Car.
Oh yeah,
No, the
marketing in the
podcast
car.
was Marketing in the Car. Like he did this years and years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It was just like this 12-minute podcast he would make from home to the office. So we took that, and in 2020, this is 4 years after he did that podcast. In 2020, we started selling him a program called Millionaire Morning Routine on Facebook. And we put up a picture of Russell with the quote that the content helped triple his productivity. We've been running that ad for going on 5 years straight. And it has made us a lot of money. And now we have a higher ticket offer where we talk about the Russell quote, but it's a video, and it's our best performing ad. So,
Wow.
5 years, we have an evergreen ad from a podcast that somebody made who read the book.
Yeah.
Like you have no idea what the book is going to lead to. I've been on some TV. I've been interviewed by Russian TV. One of the funniest things that I don't get any benefit from, but in the perfect day formula, there's something called the 10-3-2-1-0 sleep formula. And this is my most ripped off piece of content. Because if you go back and you search 10-3-2-1-0 formula, the oldest piece of content is a Medium article from me in 2015. Then it was in the book. But the most popular content, like there's people who have made videos on Instagram and have 10 million views on the 3210 10-3-2-1-0 formula. There's no mention of me. And yeah, I'm like, I don't really care. I don't know how I would have made money from it. But that's my most popular piece of content. And
Wow.
then, the Unstoppable book was a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and I went to New York and did some TV stuff. And Perfect Week Formula has probably been the best for us getting coaching clients into our business, where we help entrepreneurs make more money and work less. And, it's just been absolutely essential for my
Yeah.
business. And I really wanted to write another book, but since 2019, when I wrote Perfect Week Formula, I just didn't have the right thing to say until finally 2024.
Yeah. I love it. Beautiful.